Welcome to another video of the comprehensive beginner's guide to Android development. In this video, we are learning about the helpers widgets of the constraint layout, starting first with the group widget. A group is used usually to control the visibility of multiple views at once. You can normally change the visibility of a particular view by giving it an attribute called visibility, which accepts three possible values: visible, which is the default, invisible, and gone. Now both invisible and gone hide the view from screen, but the main difference between them is that invisible leaves the constraints, placements of that view on screen, while gone completely hide the view, leaving no trace for that particular view. Now, as you can see here on screen, I have two buttons. The first one is attached to the top of the parent and centered horizontally. The second one is also centered horizontally but attached to the bottom of the first one. Now let's try to give the first button a visibility attribute and give it the value of invisible. You can see the button is not shown on screen and it's not interactive with the user if you run your application to test that out, but still the constraints of that view still there, and the second button here is attached to the first button, so it's like it's there but it's not there at the same time. Now if you try to give the value of gone, you can see that the view is completely gone from screen, it's completely removed from screen and it's not there, and now the first button still is attached to the first button, which is now moved to the border of the parent. So whenever you have the situation where you want to control the visibility of multiple views at once, like maybe you want to make them visible, maybe invisible, or maybe even gone, you would find it very tedious and hard to just add the attribute to each and every view by hand. So instead of doing this, we could use the group widget. So here, let's just add the group widget to our layout. So you can open the palette, then go to helpers, and you can see all the helpers of the constraint layout. For now, I'm going to use the group widget. So take it and drop it to the canvas. And here, the group doesn't really need to give it any constraints. It doesn't really need to give it any placements or anything. Just a helper that helps us to control the visibility. So it will not be shown on screen. It will not be shown to the user. So just leave it as it is. Now to attach the buttons to the group, we would use an attribute called referenced IDs. And here you can give a list to the views that you want this group to control their visibility. Like here, I'm going to give it 9, button 9, separate them with a comma, button 9 and button 10. Now let's just delete the visibility of the first button and add the visibility here within the group. Let's make them gone. You can see both of them are gone. Let's make it invisible. You can see both of them are invisible, but still the constraints of them still remain. And let's just now try to make them visible. So one thing to note about the group is that the visibility value of the group overrides the default or overrides the visibility of the buttons. So for example, if you put invisible here within the group and you go to any button of your view or any view of your views and try to give it the visibility, for example, to visible, it will not be visible, as the priority goes to the group to determine the visibility of a view. Let's move to another helper for the constraint layout, which is the barrier. The barrier, in short, is just a virtual and hidden line on the screen that helps us to constrain our views according to a defined limit. And to know where this barrier will be useful, let's consider this example. So say I have this layout that resembles a book, and here we have the book's title, the book's author, along with the book's description. So as you can see here, the book's description is attached, or the start of the book's description is attached to the end of the book's author. It means whenever the book's author will change, the description size or description width will change dynamically. So let's, for example, just add this author twice. And you can see that the description changes dynamically. That's cool, but what if the book's title changes? So let's try to, for example, rename this book to, for example, The Return of Sherlock Holmes. And I can see that the book's title overrides the book's description. So the solution to this problem would be just to take the start of the description and attach it to the end of the book's title, and it will fix our problem. But what if the book's author changes, as we have seen before? So this might seem like a problem, as we cannot constrain some edge of the view to multiple views at once. And here comes the barrier that will help us to solve this problem. So here, go to the palette, open the helpers, and choose the barrier. Here we have the horizontal barrier and the vertical barrier. The difference between them is just a single attribute that defines the direction of the barrier. So here, what we want is just the vertical barrier. Take it and drop it to the canvas. Now let's go to the split mode to see the barrier and modify its attributes. So here we have to attach both of these views to the barrier. And as we did before with the group, we will use the reference IDs. And here we want to add the author along with the title. So text view 7 and text view 6. Now this one defines the direction of the barrier. So the barrier will be at the left of the views. We want the barrier to be at the right of the views. So just change this to right here. And now, instead of attaching the first or the start of the description text to any of these views, we will rather attach the start of it to the barrier. So let's just give an ID to the barrier. And now change the constraint start to end of the barrier. Now the text or the description text is attached to the barrier, and whenever any of these views changes, it will not conflict with the barrier or conflict with the description in this case. So let's just, for example, add the twice. You can see it just change it dynamically according to our author. And here I'm gonna change, for example, the text. You can see it just changes according to our text. Moving to the guideline, which is similar to the barrier. However, its size doesn't change according to the views, as it doesn't really reference any views with the reference IDs attribute. But all you're gonna do is just add the barrier to somewhere on screen, or add the guideline to somewhere on screen, and then the views are attached to that guideline. So now I'm just gonna add a guideline from the palette. So open the palette, go to helpers, and you can see we have two guidelines, horizontal and vertical one. In this case, we're going to use the horizontal one, and you can see the guideline is added. And here we have this attribute. All it does is that it just makes the barrier start from the top of the parent and then moves the barrier from the beginning of the parent to the bottom with 356 dB value. And if you want to change this, you could just simply change from the begin to the end. And you can see here, just start from the end of the parent and moves the barrier to the top with 356 dP. If you want to change direction, not from the code, from here, you just have to click this button here, or this icon, which just will change the start point of the guideline. Now I want to have my guideline at, for example, 250 dP from the beginning of the parent. And here I'm going to take my image view, I'm going to center it horizontally, and then just going to get the bottom of the image to the guideline and the top of the image to the guideline. It will be on top of the guideline. Now we also have another way to determine the placement of the guideline by using the % attribute, which is my favorite, as it really makes the guideline adaptive and reflexive on multiple devices with different screen sizes. So for example, here I'm going to put my guideline at 25% of the screen, and you can see the image is attached to the guideline. And here it's just going to put this image on 25% of the screen, no matter how or no matter what display or screen you are testing your application on. And if you want to see the result of having multiple screen sizes with the % here, you can go to the layout validation, and you can see the image here is placed on top of these different screen sizes, and you can make sure that these images or this image is placed at 25% of any screen. So we can have the phone, the foldable, the tablet. So this makes the view very adaptive on different screen sizes. So we have seen the chains before, and we know that chains place the views equivalently and accordingly within some space. So let's say that we have these views here. I'm just going to select all of them and create a horizontal chain within the parent. Right click, chain, horizontal chain, and then I'm going to just put them centered vertically on the parent. So center vertically. And you can see that some buttons just go beyond the bounds of the parent. So we don't really want this behavior unless we have some scroll bar here to scroll between the buttons. So what we want is just, if there is a view that go beyond the bounds of the parent, we want that view to move to the bottom of these chain here, or this chain here, creating another chain by itself, or creating another chain with its sibling views that go beyond the bounds of the parent. So this situation can be achieved with the help of the flow. So let me just undo all these changes, and let's add a view from, or let's add the flow from the palette here. So go to the palette, helpers, take the flow and just drop it to the parent. And here we will center the flow horizontally and vertically. Center vertically in the parent. Now let's just make it 0 dp to fill the whole bounds, the width and height. And now we're going to add the reference attribute to this flow. So here I'm going to add the reference IDs. I'm going to add all the buttons. So button 1, and now you can see all the views are just added within the flow. However, they still go beyond the position of, or go beyond the bounds of the parent. So now let's just add some attributes to modify this placement. So we have something called the wrap mode, and here we have different wrap modes. The default is none, so we're going to have the aligned, and you can see the align just aligns these buttons within the parent. We can also have the chain, which just creates a chain, and we have the chain 2. We have also different styles for the vertical and horizontal alignment. So if you just add the vertical style, for example spread inside, you can see it pushed to the end of the parent. We have the spread, which is the default, and we have the packed. Similarly for the horizontal style, we have the packed, we just put them together. Then we have the spread, the default, and the spread inside mode. You can also add some gaps between the buttons if you don't like the default gap, by using the horizontal and vertical gap attributes. I'm gonna have to add 30 dp, for example, and for the horizontal gap 30 dp as well. And here we have another attribute which can determine how many views should be on a line. For example, here if you just type the max elements wrap, you can determine how many views should be on this line or on each line. So here I'm just gonna say I want to add 2 views only on each line, and you can see here we have only 2 views. If we just change this to align, only works with align, and see we have 2 views on each line. And let me change the horizontal to spread instead of spread inside. And now let's go to view this view on different screens to see how this would affect the alignment. And now if we, for example, change the max views or max elements on a line to, for example, 4, you can see that it's not applicable to all of the layouts. So it's just applicable to the layout that can handle 4 views on a line. So for example, here you can see our phone has 3, but for the foldable device it has 4, and the tablet and the desktop. So just applicable to the device that can handle this amount of the views within a same line. You can just play around with the flow attribute. So for example, just type flow. You can see we have different attributes for the flow. Just play around with them and experiment your layout with them. Now with the layers. So the layers are similar to the groups, so we can control the visibility of the view in the layer, but we have also other functionality that we can modify with the layers. So these functionality could be like, for example, the rotation of a view and the scale of a view. So here I have 3 text views created as a chain or a vertical chain, and they're all centered horizontally within the parent. So I'm gonna open the palette and go to the helpers and drop the layer here. Now going to the split, going to the code. Here I'm going to reference all the text views with the referenced IDs: text view 1, text view 2, text view 3. And here I'm just gonna give an ID to our layer so we can call it from our code. And here we have an error because we have to constrain this, but the layer doesn't really need any constraints, so we're just gonna suppress the warning. Now going to the main activity, and you can see we have a lot of code. I don't want you to worry about this for now. I'm gonna talk about this in the next video. All you need to know for now is on these 4 lines here, we are referencing the views that we created. So this one is the layer, and then we have 3 text views. And on these 3 blocks of code, we're just adding some functionality to our text views. So whenever we click on them, the code within these blocks here will be executed. So you can see here, I'm generating a random value starting from 0 to 10 and converting it to a float. Additionally to the rotation value from 0 to 360, and then also a float. And here I'm changing the rotation of the layer with the rotation value generated randomly, as well as the scale X and Y for the layer. And if we, for example, run our application to test this functionality, you can see here, once we click on any of these buttons, the rotation will change as well as the scale. See, rotation and the scale. So this is useful, very useful when using the layer to control the scale and rotation of multiple views at once. Moving to another helper of the constraint layout, which is in this case is the placeholder. So the placeholder is nothing but just a plain view that can hold other views, and it can generally hold a view at a time. It can be useful, for example, when you, for example, have a shopping application and you have the shopping cart and you want to just add some items to the shopping cart at a time. So this would be one of the use cases you would use your placeholder. And here in our example, we have these 3 buttons here, or these 3 text views here, and whenever we click on any of these text views, our placeholder, which is this one here, will hold any of the views or the view that we clicked on here. So let's just go to the main activity to look at the code. And again, I don't want you to be worried about the code for now. In the next video, we'll learn how we can reference the views, how we can just find the views, how we can add functionality to the views as we did here. Anyway, the only thing that you need to know about is that whenever we click on any of the buttons, the content of the placeholder will be set to that particular view. So say, for example, we clicked on the banana text, then the content of the placeholder will be set to the banana text view. Now let's just run the application. And here comes the application. If you, for example, try to click on the tomato, you can see the placeholder holds the tomato and it's removed from the original chain. If you, for example, try to add the watermelon, it works perfectly. Banana, for example, and this is how we can use the placeholder. Now let's explore the image filter view and the image filter button. Well, both of them are pretty similar to the normal image view that we know. However, they are used to perform image processing and image manipulation. Now, the image filter view and the image filter button both are similar to each other. So whatever you can do with the image filter view, you can do with the image filter button. So we're just gonna play around with the image filter view. So take it and drop it, choose some simple data, then just center it within the parent vertically and horizontally. Then I'm gonna just make it 0dp to match the constraints of the parent, or to match its constraints. Then delete the bias because we don't need it. And lastly, add your image with src attribute or the src combat attribute. So I have already prepared two images, space 1 and space 2. I'm gonna choose. You can see our actual image here is put within the image filter view. Now to add another image or an alternative image to this image filter view, we would use an attribute called alt src, which just adds another image to the current image, space 2. And the image is just put underneath the first one. Now we have a couple of attributes to manipulate or process our image. I'm just going to put them on screen so for you to view them. I'll also include a link in the description for these attributes. Now let's start by manipulating our images by adding, for example, a crossfade between these two images. Now 0, it just resembles the first image, 1 resembles the second image, and if you have a value between 0 and 1, for example like 0.5, you can see the images are just joined together, just like an intersection between these two images, just creating a mix of these two images. Let's just manipulate it even further by slightly brighter than before, and to make them twice as bright as before. Just take some time to you can see the change here. It just takes some time to process the image. And now let's add another attribute, which is called the round, and it's one of my favorite attributes within the image filter view, as it makes the view slightly rounder. It makes the image slightly rounder than before. So for example here, let's just add the value of 1, and it just takes some time to apply these effects on the view. So I would rather just run the application to test the changes. As you see here in our emulator, the images are slightly rounded. It's like making an oval shape of these two images. So just to fix this out, I'm gonna add scale type to these images, scale type center crop, and then run the application once again. You can see now it just makes an oval shape of the whole image. Now for example, if you want to have that perfect circle shape, here comes the power of using the guideline. So I'm just gonna have to add the guideline, horizontal guideline to the screen, and then make the guideline at the 50% of the screen with the guideline percent. We're gonna add 0.5, and instead of just making the bottom of the image or the image filter view to the parent, I'm gonna make the bottom to the guideline here. And now you can see it just centered on the first portion of the screen, and here comes the perfect circle that we were looking for. Now lastly, we have the MockView, which is just nothing but a plain view that just lets you create a prototype of your layout. So whenever you have to create some layout, instead of just dragging and dropping your views and constrain them, maybe you would take the MockView and just put it on screen to test the layout, to test the buttons, to test for example the color. So it's not very used much. In my opinion, it's pretty useless because I don't really use it, and I didn't see anyone use it before, but you can use it and play around with it. Anyway, I'll put a link in the description below for a very good video created by Android developers' official YouTube channel that talks about the constraint layout and how we can use it in your applications. Make sure to check that out, and I'll put a link to the description below. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.